The kitchen was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. 1:43 a.m. Again. I stood by the counter, barefoot on the cold tile, holding a chipped mug of manzanilla tea I hadn't even sipped. The lights were off, save for the thin gold spill from the open fridge door behind him. He was there already. Always was. Sitting on the edge of the table like it was his own house. Like he belonged here. His legs dangled slightly, fingers tapping some silent rhythm on his thigh. I didn't ask what he was doing awake. I never did. The clock ticked. He said something I didn't catch, my ears were buzzing, or maybe it was the pressure of everything I hadn't said for years. He looked at me with that same quiet boldness that made me feel both twice my age and entirely reborn. I turned toward the sink. He stood. Our steps synchronized. Close now. Almost too close. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up. The hallway light flicked on. Footsteps. The moment shattered like porcelain on tile. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question. Do you agree that everyone deserves a second chance after cheating? If you're expecting the story of a confident, reckless woman chasing danger, you're in the wrong place. I wasn't looking for anything. Not attention. Not affection. Not trouble. And certainly not him. It started, like most things in my life, without warning. That summer, Madrid had lost its mind. The air was dry and hot, and the nights clung to our skin like sweat-drenched sheets. My husband said we should offer our guest the spare room. Just for a few weeks, he said. While his classes start. Poor kid, the dorms are full. He wasn't a kid. He was 20-something, with a calmness that made people speak slower around him. He was my best friend's son. His arrival was marked by nothing more than a casual hola and the drop of his suitcase by the front door. He was polite, helpful, even funny in that quiet way that sneaks up on you hours later. The first few days were uneventful. He went to class. I went through routines. My husband spent hours in his office on endless Zoom calls and then collapsed in bed like a broken statue, face down, sound asleep. Then, the heat wave hit. And with it, the insomnia. I found myself wandering the house past midnight, in oversized cotton shirts, drawn to the kitchen for cold drinks and solitude. The first time I saw him there, sitting in the half-light, drinking from a bottle of water, I said nothing. Neither did he. It became a rhythm neither of us talked about. 1:43 a.m. Always the same time. Always the same silence. On the third night, I asked, "Why are you always up?" He shrugged. "Maybe because someone else always is." I laughed. It startled me. It had been so long since someone replied like that, without calculation, without effort, just real. The next night, he brought a slice of toasted pan con tomate and offered me half. I took it. No words. One night, I caught myself looking at the door 5 minutes before 1:43, like a clock wound inside me had synced itself to his steps. It was foolish. I told myself it was just the quiet, the coolness of the tiled floor under my feet, the way the fridge light made the kitchen feel like a different world, one where I wasn't the overlooked wife or the reliable friend. Just someone, visible. He never crossed a line. Not a single word out of place. But sometimes, when I said goodnight, I swore I could feel something heavy pass between us. Something unsaid. Something waiting. I began to change my routine without realizing it. I stayed up later. I adjusted my bath time. I paid more attention to my hair before bed. Nothing scandalous. Just subtle. One morning, as I made café solo for my husband, I noticed a strange flicker on the corner of the kitchen cabinet. I leaned in. A small blinking red dot. Security, he'd said months ago when he installed them. Just in case. You never know these days. The kitchen camera. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then went about my day as if I hadn't seen it. That night, I waited. 1:43 came. I hesitated. I tiptoed down. He was there, of course. He looked up from his phone. You almost didn't come. I smiled. Almost. We sat. We didn't talk much. I remember that distinctly, how the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt shared. But then, something strange happened. The next morning, my husband walked in with a USB stick in his hand. Do you know what this is? He asked. I shook my head slowly. Should I? He chuckled. No idea. It was in the mailbox. No note. Just this. He left it on the counter. And walked out. I stood frozen. My throat closed in a round air. I looked at it, black, plastic, insignificant, and felt my heart pound so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Later that day, I opened the drawer where we kept old electronics and saw the other USB sticks neatly labeled. This one wasn't ours. I didn't plug it in. I couldn't. I hid it under a stack of old napkins. And that night, I didn't go to the kitchen. I locked the bedroom door. I didn't sleep. The next night, I didn't move from bed. Not at 1 o'clock. Not at 1:20. Not even when the small hand crept toward 1:43. I watched the digital numbers shift in red, minute by minute, waiting for something, anything, to push me out from under the covers. I stayed curled against the edge of the mattress, listening to the quiet house, heart tapping out a rhythm I couldn't silence. But nothing happened. No steps in the hall. No creak from the kitchen. No light humming from the fridge. Only silence. By 2:06, I threw the covers off. The air was hot and dry. My feet hit the floor with more decision than I expected. I moved down the hallway barefoot, quiet, careful. The living room was dark. The kitchen even darker. Empty. For a moment, I thought he'd given up. That the pattern we never acknowledged had cracked. But then I saw the back door. Slightly open. Not wide. Just enough to let the heat slip in. I stepped outside. He was there, leaning against the railing of the patio, a glass of water in one hand, staring into the distance like something was waiting for him in the shadows of the courtyard. He didn't turn around. I don't think he was surprised. I don't even think he was disappointed. He just said, softly, I didn't think you'd come. I said nothing. We stood in silence. The night wrapped around us like a thick curtain, Madrid's dry summer air clinging to the skin. I didn't ask why he was out there. He didn't ask why I finally came. That was the unspoken language we had now, no explanations, no questions. Just time and the moments we chose to share. He sat down on the garden bench, motioned slightly. I hesitated, then joined him. We didn't look at each other. Just sat. Two outlines under the pale flicker of a nearby street lamp. He pulled something from his pocket, a small square of napkin, folded, slightly crumpled. I brought this from the cafe, he said. They were giving out samples. Thought you'd like it. It was a tiny empanada, still warm inside the napkin. I took it. No thank you. Just took it. I don't remember the taste. Only the stillness. And how strangely full the silence between us felt. We didn't speak for a while. The minutes stretched long, weightless. I looked at the clock on my phone once. 1:43. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you ever feel like nobody notices you anymore? The question pierced like a whisper at a funeral. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He turned toward me then, not fully, just enough. I could feel his gaze, but I kept my eyes ahead. I felt something shift. A current that pulled gently, then stronger. I said quietly, sometimes I think I disappear between sunrise and bedtime. He didn't laugh. He didn't comfort. He just said, I see you. I looked at him. The distance between us had never felt closer. We said nothing more. The moment paused. We kissed. I stood quickly after. My breath felt too loud. I should go back inside, I murmured. He nodded once, slow. I know. I walked toward the door, heart pounding so fast I was sure it echoed off the concrete. Inside, the kitchen felt different. The light over the stove blinked faintly. I closed the back door quietly, trying not to make a sound. Every part of me was trembling, not from fear, but from something I didn't want to name. I turned to go back to bed. But then I saw it. The USB stick. Still there. On the counter. Unplugged. Unmoving. But present. Like a threat. Like a test. I stared at it. I didn't touch it. Instead, I picked up a paper towel, wrapped it around the stick, and shoved it deep into the spice drawer, under old packets of saffron and crushed garlic cubes. Then I turned off the lights. I didn't sleep. The next morning, the house was buzzing. My husband was on the phone, rushing around with his tablet in hand. The client moved up the deadline, he said quickly between sips of coffee. We need to leave this weekend. Burgos. I have meetings. I barely registered the words. Come with me, he added. It might be nice. Nice. I forced a smile. Sure. Later that afternoon, I saw our guest at the edge of the hallway, grabbing his backpack. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. Not awkward. Not bold. Just recognition. I looked away first. The day blurred. Calls. Emails. Grocery lists. Dry laundry. I moved through it all like I was wearing someone else's body. That night, at 1:40, I sat on the edge of my bed and waited. I wasn't going to the kitchen. Not tonight. Not again. I stared at the door. At the hallway. At the darkness. And then. Steps. Soft. Light. Coming toward my room. Then, stopping. Outside my door. Silence. Then retreating. I waited until the sounds disappeared. Only then did I breathe. I didn't sleep. The following morning, as I poured water into the kettle, I noticed something. A folded piece of paper tucked between the bananas in the fruit bowl. No name. No handwriting. Just one line. You forgot to look up last night. I froze. My hands trembled slightly. I read it again. And again. And then slowly, I lifted my gaze to the corner of the ceiling above the kitchen shelf, to a small dark spot I hadn't noticed before. No blinking light. No cables. Just a black dot. Almost invisible. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My heart thundered so loudly I could barely hear the whistle of the kettle. But this wasn't fear. This was something colder. Something deeper. I reached for the note again, but it was gone. There was nothing in the bowl now. Nothing at all. The fruit bowl was empty. I stood there, frozen, fingers still curled slightly from where I had just touched the folded paper. The bananas were gone, or maybe they'd never been there to begin with. My mind tried to rationalize it, rewrite the memory, fill in the blanks with anything but the truth of what I had just seen, or thought I saw. I blinked, once, twice. The kitchen stayed the same. Still. Mute. I didn't pick up the kettle. I didn't finish making the tea. I left the kitchen and walked slowly to the living room, trying to trace any sound that didn't belong. I didn't find any. Everything in the house was exactly where it should be. Every pillow on the sofa, every pair of shoes lined up near the door, every light off. The only thing out of place was me. I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination. A moment of exhaustion. Something my mind invented to match the pressure growing in my chest. And yet, the unease didn't let go. The morning dragged on with quiet tension. I kept glancing at my phone, checking the time for no reason. He was out. Said he had errands, classes, something at the market. I didn't ask. I didn't want to. My husband came home early with good news. His meetings had been postponed. We don't have to leave for Burgos until next week, he said, tossing his briefcase onto the armchair. Let's have dinner out tonight. Something different. I nodded. I couldn't remember the last time we'd gone out. That used to mean something. A treat. A spark. Now it was logistics. Timing. Reservations. A reason to change out of the same rotation of clothes I wore every week. I got ready without thought, going through the motions like I was playing a part. Mascara. Lipstick. A scarf that added color I didn't feel. He chose a small restaurant in Lavapes, the kind with narrow tables and flickering candles, soft jazz in the background, and waiters who spoke too softly. The conversation was light. Empty. We talked about nothing, neighbors, work, weather. He made a joke about how I'd finally escaped the house, and I smiled because that's what was expected. He ordered wine. I barely touched mine. But somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, I saw him. He wasn't alone. He was walking with someone, a girl his age. Brunette, tall, wrapped in summer linens, laughing at something he said as they passed the restaurant's window. They didn't see us. Or maybe he did. He didn't react. I stared long enough that my husband noticed and turned around. Is that him? He asked. Looks like he's finally making friends. I nodded slowly. Looks like it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa with the television on mute, watching the light flicker across the walls. The house felt tighter, the silence more dense. At 1:20, I moved to the kitchen. Not because I needed anything, but because I didn't want to feel like I was avoiding it. I stood by the sink, then reached for the cupboard and poured water into a glass. I didn't turn on the lights. The shadows knew me now. They were familiar. The clock shifted to 1:43. Then came the sound. Soft steps. Not from the hallway. From outside. The back door creaked open. I turned just as he entered, holding something wrapped in wax paper. I brought you this, he said simply, as if it were any other night. As if nothing had happened. I didn't speak. He placed the package on the counter, then leaned against the doorframe. No tension. No guilt. Just presence. I saw you, I said. Earlier. In Lavapes. He tilted his head. I figured. I nodded, unsure what I expected to hear. I didn't plan that, he added after a pause. It just happened. I stared at the paper package. So do most things lately. We didn't move. The air felt suspended, pulled tight between us. He stepped forward slowly, like he was approaching something fragile. But this never just happened. You know that. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed. But because I knew he was right. He came closer, not touching, not invading, but close enough that I felt the shift in temperature. The pull of gravity. We kissed. I stepped back almost immediately. Not in panic, but in realization. The weight of it all. The implications. The contradiction of being both afraid and completely awake. I reached for the glass of water. My hands were shaking slightly. I don't know what I'm doing, I said. Neither do I, he replied. And somehow, that made it worse. The following day, I woke up before anyone else. The sky was still dim. I went straight to the kitchen. Not to make coffee. Not to prepare breakfast. But to check. I pulled open the spice drawer and felt around. The USB stick was still there. Still wrapped. Still untouched. But this time, I didn't hide it again. I took it out. Carried it to my bedroom. Closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed with the stick in my hand, heart pounding like it wanted out of my ribs. Then I slid open the drawer of my nightstand and placed it inside, right on top. I needed it where I could see it. By the time breakfast rolled around, the house had returned to its normal rhythm. My husband left early. He had meetings again. This time, for real, he said with a chuckle. Next week we're definitely going to Burgos. I smiled. Nodded. He was gone. He was still asleep when I walked past the guest room. I didn't knock. I didn't pause. I walked straight out the door. By the time I reached the market, the streets were waking up. Vendors shouted prices, old women argued over jamon, children chased pigeons near the fountain. I walked with purpose, but no direction. I passed by cafes, bookstores, souvenir shops. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar. Stronger. Older. Braver. Sadder. I turned a corner and stopped. A familiar voice was laughing behind me. I turned. It was her. The girl from the restaurant. The one he'd walked with. She was at a flower stall, talking to the vendor. Her hair was tied up this time, sunglasses perched on her head. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small bouquet of peonies wrapped in brown paper. She was smiling. Then she turned, and I saw what was in her other hand. A USB stick. Identical to mine. Same black plastic. Same cap. She didn't see me. She slipped it into her pocket as she walked away. Carefree. Unaware. My breath caught. She hadn't bought it. She'd been given it. My stomach twisted. I turned and walked the opposite way, faster now, heart slamming in my chest. Someone else had one. Someone else had seen. I walked fast. Past the cafes. Past the Chio stand on the corner that smelled like burnt sugar. Past the sound of children chasing each other across cobblestones. I didn't stop until I reached a block with no one I recognized. Only then did I breathe, and even that felt too loud. Someone else had a copy. Or something that looked like one. It could have been anything, I tried telling myself. A flash drive. A receipt. A lipstick tube with sharp corners. But it wasn't. I knew it. That same matte black plastic. That same shape. She hadn't bought it, she'd been carrying it like it meant something. I didn't go home right away. I wandered, pretending to look through shop windows, pretending to care about price tags or displays or the rhythm of passing cars. But my thoughts wouldn't settle. Everything looped back to that single moment. The USB in her hand. The bouquet of peonies. Her laugh. His laugh from the night before. Their walk past our table. The way he didn't even flinch. When I finally returned, the house felt too quiet. I moved through it slowly, like the furniture might rearrange itself when I wasn't looking. I half expected him to be there, in the kitchen, in the hall, leaning against a doorframe like nothing had happened. But the house was empty. Only my husband was home, and he was already packing for Burgos. Folding shirts in half, struggling with his laptop charger, mumbling to himself about delays and clients. I stood by the doorway of our bedroom for a moment, watching him move through tasks without emotion, like he was prepping for a business trip and not realizing the ground under his feet had cracked open. When he looked up, I smiled. Reflex, automatic. "You've been out a while," he said. "Had some errands," I replied. "And I needed to walk." He nodded and went back to his suitcase. That night, the city celebrated San Juan. Flames were already being lit in small parks and street corners. I heard music echoing through alleyways. The smell of firewood and fireworks floated in from open windows. Around 10, my husband said goodnight. His meeting started early, and he wanted to rest. He kissed my cheek like a man paying a debt and shut the door behind him. I stood alone in the living room, barefoot on the tile, hearing the sounds of celebration all around me, distant voices, bursts of laughter, the pop of firecrackers. Outside, the sky flickered orange and gold. I didn't plan on going to him. That's the truth. I didn't plan on anything. But at 1:43, I was in the hallway. The door to the guest room was cracked open. Light spilled through in a narrow line. He didn't say anything when he saw me. Just sat up on the edge of the bed, like he'd been waiting, like he already knew. There were no words. No awkwardness. No explanations. We spent night together. In the morning, everything was different. And yet, nothing looked different. The world still turned. The sun still poured through the windows in two bright rectangles. The neighbors still watered their plants like it was any other Thursday. But I wasn't the same. I couldn't be. I showered in silence. Got dressed in silence. Moved through the kitchen in silence. He wasn't there. His room was empty, the bed made. No sign of movement. On the table was a note in his handwriting, "Gone for a bit. We'll be back before lunch." I sat down at the table and stared at it. Then I opened the spice drawer and took out the USB. I needed to know. I placed it on the counter. Plugged it into the laptop. My finger hovered over the trackpad, hesitating for just a second, then I clicked. A single folder appeared. June_24. Inside it, one video. No title. No timestamp. Just play. I clicked again. The screen stayed black for 3 seconds. Then the image appeared. The kitchen. Our kitchen. Midnight, maybe later. I couldn't tell. There I was, clearly visible. And there he was too. No audio. No labels. No cuts. Just us. In the kitchen. Sitting. Laughing. Looking at each other too long. The scene stretched on and on, too long for coincidence, too deliberate for comfort. It ended just before I stood up. I closed the laptop slowly. The camera hadn't been there. I'd looked. I'd checked. There was no lens, no light, no nothing. But the footage was real. I took the USB out. My fingers felt numb. I wanted to throw it away. Burn it. Crush it. But instead, I slid it back into the drawer. I needed to think. But I didn't have time. The doorbell rang. Once. Then silence. I froze. Nobody was expected. Not today. Not at this hour. I walked slowly to the door, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my neck. I didn't open it immediately. I waited. Listened. No voices. No steps. No movement. Then I unlocked it. There was no one outside. Only a small box, plain white, taped shut. No name. No markings. I picked it up. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was another USB. And a note. Just 5 words, scrawled quickly, "You forgot the other angle." My stomach dropped. I rushed back inside, shut the door, locked it. I placed the second USB next to the first and stared at them, side by side. 2. Identical. The first had shown the kitchen. But now, there was another. Another view. Another perspective. And whoever sent it knew exactly what I had seen. Exactly what I had missed. I didn't touch the second USB for hours. I couldn't. It sat there on the table like a threat dressed in silence. I moved around it, fixed tea, opened windows, closed drawers. But it never left my sight. Every time I glanced its way, it looked smaller and more dangerous. Compact. Deceptive. Too light for what it might carry inside. He returned around noon. I heard his footsteps in the hallway before I saw him. My hands tightened around the tea mug. I stood still, watching the entrance to the kitchen like a deer waiting for movement in tall grass. He walked in casually, hair still damp from a shower, wearing a white t-shirt and a grin like nothing had happened. He greeted me with a soft good morning. I nodded. "You all right?" he asked after a moment. "Fine," I lied. "Did you have a good walk?" He nodded. Clear skies. I didn't ask where he went. I didn't ask who he saw. He grabbed a glass from the cupboard, poured water, and stood across from me at the island. For a few seconds, it was just 2 people in a kitchen, acting normal. But everything had shifted. There were now 2 USBs. 2 videos. 2 angles. And I had no idea who was behind them, or why. Later that day, my husband came home earlier than usual, carrying pastries and a bottle of red wine. He set them on the counter and announced that he'd invited my best friend over for a casual dinner. "She's back in town," he said. "Hasn't seen her son in days." My chest tightened. I hadn't spoken to her since he moved in. Not really. We exchanged a few messages, but they were light, superficial, full of emojis and polite questions. She had no idea. Of course she didn't. I wanted to object. Say no. Make an excuse. But I couldn't form a reason that didn't collapse under its own weight. So I smiled. "That'll be nice." She arrived around 7. Bright. Warm. The way she always was. She brought a bottle of cava and 3 kinds of cheese, apologizing dramatically for being gone so long. The 3 of us stood in the kitchen as if this were any ordinary evening, with laughter that felt slightly too loud and conversations that steered sharply away from anything meaningful. He arrived halfway through, hair still damp again. She ran to hug him, arms tied around his shoulders, commenting on how skinny he looked, how quiet he'd been, how impossible it was to reach him. He laughed. Played the part. Answered her questions like a good son. Not once did his eyes meet mine. The night stretched long. We ate on the patio, the last rays of daylight slipping behind the rooftops. I drank more than I should have. Not to numb the tension, but to control the tremble in my hands. My best friend talked endlessly. She spoke about her recent trip, her neighbors, some drama at work. My husband added his commentary in between bites. They all laughed like it was a reunion. Like nothing in the world was wrong. I was barely listening. The second USB felt like it was burning a hole through the drawer inside. At some point, she mentioned redecorating her place, asking her son to help paint the living room. She turned to me, playful and curious. Has he been a nightmare guest? Tell me the truth. I forced a laugh. Not at all. Quiet. Polite. Mostly invisible. She smiled. That's what worries me. Everyone laughed again. Except me. After dessert, the night began to wind down. They cleared the table. I stayed seated, watching shadows stretch across the patio tiles. My head was spinning from more than just the wine. They said their goodbyes. My friend kissed both of my cheeks, held my hands in hers, and whispered, "We need a real talk soon." Just us. I nodded. Then they were gone. The house fell silent again. I returned to the kitchen. My husband was washing dishes. The light above the sink cast him in soft yellow. I watched him for a moment before speaking. "Are you really excited about Burgos?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's work. But you wanted me to come." He nodded. "It's been a while. Maybe we need it." I didn't reply. He dried his hands and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Then he said something that made the air leave my lungs. "You've been distant lately." I looked away. "Have I?" He nodded. "Not just with me. With everything. You're somewhere else." I opened my mouth, then closed it. He studied my face, waiting for something I didn't have the strength to give. Eventually he said, "Maybe Burgos will fix that." Maybe. I didn't believe it. He went to bed early again. Another early morning. Another round of meetings. His life was a calendar of quiet routines. Once I heard the bedroom door close, I moved quickly. I went to the drawer and took the second USB. I sat down at the laptop, plugged it in. One file. No label. I clicked. The image loaded slowly. At first, it was dark. Grainy. Then it sharpened. It wasn't the kitchen. It was the hallway. A different angle. Not eye level. Low. Like it was recorded from something small. Discreet. But again, no signs of where it was placed. The footage showed me walking down the hallway. It was from that night. When I opened the guest room door. When I stepped inside. When I closed it behind me. The video ended before anything else. I sat still for a long time. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't something lost or found. Someone was watching. Someone knew the timing. The angles. The sequence of moments. Not only that, it was being documented with care. Delivered with intent. This was deliberate. I pulled the USB out. My fingers trembled. I returned it to the drawer. Just as I closed it, I noticed a small piece of paper tucked between the utensils. It hadn't been there before. I pulled it out slowly. 5 words, written in that same rushed handwriting. Next one comes with sound. I read the words again. Next one comes with sound. Each syllable cut through the air sharper than the last. Not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. There was no demand. No signature. No clue. Just a statement. An inevitability. The pressure in my chest tightened. I stared at the note until my vision blurred, then folded it, tucked it deep into the back of the drawer, and walked away. By morning, the storm outside had turned the sky into a sheet of low gray. The kind that makes everything look colder, heavier. My husband left early again, suitcase in one hand, umbrella in the other, too distracted to notice anything. He reminded me that he'd be in Burgos for 2 nights now. 1 day longer than originally planned. Hotels confirmed, he said. I'll text when I land. I nodded. My smile didn't reach past my teeth. The moment the door closed behind him, I locked it. Not out of fear. Out of instinct. By midday, I was cleaning the kitchen as if my life depended on it. Wiping down surfaces I had already wiped. Scrubbing the inside of drawers. Checking behind the coffee machine. My movements were fast, mechanical. I wasn't looking for a camera, I didn't believe there ever was one. But I was looking for something. Anything. Some crack. Some logic. Some explanation for how this had become my reality. He came into the kitchen without warning. I hadn't heard the bedroom door open. I hadn't heard his steps. You okay? He asked. I didn't answer at first. Then I turned around. I need air, I said. Come with me. We ended up at the flea market near El Rastro. Not because we needed anything. Not even because we wanted to be there. I just couldn't breathe in the house anymore. And I couldn't be alone with him inside it. We walked between crowded stalls filled with old postcards, broken clocks, cheap sunglasses, and paintings that looked like forgotten secrets. We didn't talk much. A few words here and there. He pointed to a vintage camera once and made a joke I didn't catch. I nodded, but I wasn't really listening. My eyes were scanning every corner. Every face. Every small plastic object on a table. I didn't know what I was looking for. But I felt watched. I had felt it for days now. Eventually, we sat at a small cafe off the main street. Outside, under the awning, rain began to drift sideways with the wind. I stirred my tea. He drank his espresso in silence. He looked at me. Really looked. Something's wrong. The words weren't accusatory. They weren't demanding. They were observant. I nodded. Yes. You want to talk about it? No. We sat like that for several minutes. The cafe's only other customer was an old man reading a crumpled newspaper with shaking hands. I watched him as if his page-turning would reveal something important. I reached into my bag and pulled out the first USB. I want to show you something, I said. He didn't ask questions. He just took it, turned it over in his fingers, then looked back at me. Where did it come from? The mailbox. When? Days ago. He didn't move. Have you watched it? Yes. His voice was quiet. And? It shows us. That was all I said. He didn't react. He placed the USB on the table. You think someone's following us? I don't know. You think someone saw us? I know they did. I watched his jaw tighten slightly. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. As if he was rearranging pieces in his head and trying to find the pattern. I leaned in. Do you know anyone who would do something like this? He met my eyes. I don't. Anyone from university? No one who knows where I live. No one who knows about you. Your mother? He shook his head. She barely checks her email, let alone has time for this kind of thing. I believed him. But believing him didn't change what I knew: someone was watching. And they were just getting started. The rain grew heavier as we walked home. Umbrellas flipped inside out around us, tourists darted under storefronts, and delivery bikes zipped past puddles with reckless speed. He offered me his jacket when the wind picked up. I declined. By the time we got back, my shoes were soaked. I peeled them off by the door and stepped into the kitchen. It was exactly as we had left it. Silent. Still. Almost smug. I went straight to the drawer. The second USB was still there. I placed it beside the first one on the table. Then, after a moment, I reached for the laptop. He stood across from me, arms folded, eyes tracking every move. I plugged in the second USB again. The hallway video began to play. This time, he was seeing it too. I didn't look at the screen. I watched his face. He blinked. But he didn't flinch. "You think there's more?" he asked. "There will be." Then I remembered the note. Next one comes with sound. I got up quickly and walked to the drawer where I'd hidden it. I pulled it out and showed him. He read the words twice. Then he sat down. "We can't ignore this," I said. "I'm not." "What do we do?" He thought for a long moment, then said, "We wait." "For what?" "For the next one." I laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. Out of exhaustion. Out of the realization that this was real and growing. He looked at me, dead serious. "If someone wants us to see something, they will make sure we see it. They're not hiding." I sat back down. We stared at the table. At the laptop. At the USBs. Until there was a knock. Not the doorbell. A single, deliberate knock. I stood slowly. Moved toward the door. Each step measured, careful. I opened it. No one. Only a padded envelope. Plain. Sealed. No writing. I brought it inside. We opened it together. Inside. A flash drive. And a tiny speaker. No note. No instructions. Just a folded slip of paper with 2 numbers handwritten in black ink. 143. 208. I felt the blood drain from my hands. I plugged it in. A single audio file. The title? Kitchen. San Juan. The moment it started playing, I froze. It was my voice. My laugh. His voice. His laugh. And then, the sound of footsteps. A door closing. Then silence. And then, my voice again. Whispering something I didn't remember saying. But it was me. And it was real. The file ended. The speaker clicked off. The room felt 10 degrees colder. He looked at me. And I looked at him. Neither of us said a word. Then, he reached into his back pocket. And slowly pulled out something I hadn't seen before. Another USB. One I hadn't given him. One he never told me he had. I stared at the USB in his hand like it wasn't real. Like he wasn't real. He didn't say anything. Just held it out to me. I didn't take it. Instead, I looked at him. Carefully. Slowly. As if seeing him for the first time since the night this all began. And maybe I was. maybe until this moment, I hadn't wanted to see. I had wanted the story to stay soft around the edges. Controlled. But now that illusion was gone. Where did you get it? I asked. He placed it gently on the table. Mailbox. When? 3 days ago. Why didn't you tell me? His reply came with a pause. Because I didn't want to know what was on it. I watched his face. He wasn't lying. But he wasn't telling the full truth either. Something lived in the space behind his eyes, something unfinished. I didn't touch the USB. I picked up the envelope it came in instead. Same as the others. No markings. No return address. No label. I opened the laptop again. Inserted the drive. The file appeared. This one was titled simply, CAM5.mp4. The number hit me hard. 5. Not 2. Not 3. 5. How many angles were there? I clicked play. The video began. It was the bedroom. My bedroom. Our bedroom. I felt the blood drain from my limbs. The image wasn't recent, it was from weeks ago. The lighting was different. My hair shorter. It was a Saturday morning. I recognized the robe I wore, the one I'd since thrown away. I was alone in the shot. Sitting on the edge of the bed, tying my slippers. Then my husband walked in. He handed me a cup of coffee. We spoke, but there was no sound. He sat next to me. Touched my back. I laughed. That day, I remembered, he had surprised me with breakfast. That day, I thought, had been normal. The video ran for 8 minutes and ended with him leaving the room and me sipping my coffee alone, unaware I was being watched. I closed the laptop without saying anything. He stood across from me, unmoving. I didn't know about that one, he said. I nodded, but my hands didn't stop trembling. The following day, the invitation arrived. A message in our family group chat. My best friend was hosting a small farewell party for her son. He was returning to Granada the following week. The idea made me nauseous. He hadn't told me. He hadn't said a word about leaving. And now suddenly there was a party planned, guests invited, drinks being chilled, and a version of the future I hadn't been asked to participate in. I typed, of course, I'll be there, and closed the app. I didn't see him that night. I didn't hear the usual 143 pacing down the hall. Maybe he didn't want to meet. Maybe I didn't either. I lay in bed, wide awake, the fan buzzing overhead like a reminder of how loud silence can become. The day of the party arrived like a sharp edge. My husband was already back from Burgos, rested, cheerful, more affectionate than he'd been in months. He kissed my shoulder while I cooked, complimented the dress I chose, helped load the car with wine and paper lanterns. He was excited for the gathering, for seeing old friends, for playing the role of supportive host. The party was held at her house, his mother's, just a few streets away. She'd set up a long table in the backyard, decorated it with string lights and bowls of olives, manchego, and slices of chorizo. Guests arrived in waves, bringing bottles, laughter, and the sticky heat of the evening with them. He was already there when we arrived. Standing near the grill, flipping skewers, surrounded by friends. He looked comfortable, natural. Like someone with no secrets. I watched him speak to an older couple, nodding politely, laughing at a joke. He didn't look at me. We moved through the evening as if nothing had happened. I refilled glasses, answered questions, smiled at stories I wasn't listening to. My best friend hugged me twice, said she'd missed me, asked if I was okay. I said I was tired. The heat. The summer. She nodded with sympathy and poured me more wine. Music drifted through the air from a small speaker on the windowsill. Somewhere between boleros and bachata, my husband danced with her, then with me. Everything felt like a carefully arranged scene. Nobody knew anything. Nobody noticed anything. And yet, the weight behind my ribs pressed harder with every passing minute. Just before midnight, I stepped away from the table and into the house. I needed a break. Space. Air. I moved through the hallway and into the front room, where the lights were dim and the windows were cracked open. The sounds of the party floated in gently, muffled laughter, a bottle uncorking, music skipping to the next track. And then, footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. He stopped just short of reaching me. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said. I turned around. "When did you decide to leave?" He hesitated. "A few days ago." I nodded. "That explains the video." He looked confused for a second, then realized what I meant. "I didn't send it," he said. "I know." He stepped closer, but not enough to touch. "I didn't plan for this to end this way." "Did you plan for it to begin at all?" I asked. "No." That part was true. We stood like that for a long time. The air between us thick, unspoken things weaving tighter by the second. I didn't ask him to stay. He didn't ask me to follow. We were both already past the point of pretending there was a version of this that ended quietly. When we returned to the backyard, people were gathering for a toast. My husband handed me a glass of cava. My best friend stood beside her son, proud, tipsy, glowing. She raised her glass and told a long, winding story about the day he was born, how he kicked so hard the first time he saw sunlight. Everyone laughed. She cried a little. She kissed his cheek. I smiled. I clinked glasses. I drank. Later, as we were saying our goodbyes and heading back down the street toward home, my husband slipped his hand into mine. It was automatic. Familiar. Weightless. I didn't pull away. The house was quiet when we arrived. He went straight to bed, exhausted. I stood in the kitchen, turning the events of the evening over and over in my head. Then I saw it. On the counter. Another padded envelope. This one was different. Not white. Red. No return address. No markings. I opened it with steady hands. Inside, another USB. And one slip of paper. 5 handwritten words. CAM5 had a second half. I stood motionless in the kitchen, red envelope open on the counter, the USB resting inside like something that could detonate. The folded slip of paper sat beside it, the ink slightly smudged but still perfectly legible. CAM5 had a second half. My body moved before I made a conscious decision. I pulled the USB out, plugged it into the laptop, and waited. Nothing. No folder. No file name. Just a blank screen for 3 seconds. Then, a black window with a single word in the center. Continue? The cursor blinked below it. I clicked once. The screen stayed black for 5 more seconds. And then it began. The same bedroom. Same camera angle. Same lighting. The continuation of a moment I had thought ended. But it didn't pick up where the first file had left off. It started from later. Much later. The room was dark. Curtains pulled. Shadows everywhere. But you could still make out the outlines of bodies. Movements. Sounds, low and muffled, filtered through the speakers like distant memories. And then my voice. Clear. Laughter. Whispered words. My hand reaching out for something. Him stepping into the frame. No touches. Just proximity. Breath. Energy. Suspended tension. But the thing that made my heart stop wasn't what happened on the screen. It was what I saw in the mirror. In the top right corner of the shot, reflecting just enough of the room. A shape. Not ours. Not moving. Not speaking. Someone sitting. Still. Watching. I stared, mouth dry, heart hammering as if it wanted out. The file ended. The screen went black again. I closed the laptop without thinking. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there, in the dark kitchen, the laptop warm under my hands, the room spinning around me like it had come unglued from time. I tried to replay the memory. That night. The bedroom. I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't heard anything. There was no sign, nothing out of place. But that shape in the mirror, it was unmistakable. Not furniture. Not shadow. Not illusion. Someone had been there. In the room. With us. Watching. I stood up fast, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I turned every light on in the house. The living room. The hallway. The guest room. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No sign of anyone. He was asleep in the guest room, one arm tossed over his forehead, the window slightly open. I stood in the doorway, staring at him, trying to breathe normally. But something had shifted inside me. Something I couldn't name. I backed out slowly. Closed the door gently. Then I walked to the bedroom. My husband stirred slightly as I slipped into bed, but didn't wake. I lay there, eyes wide open, the ceiling above me stretching like a void. I didn't sleep. Morning came and shattered the silence. I made coffee on autopilot. Toasted bread I didn't eat. Opened windows. Closed them again. He entered the kitchen around 8:30. Hair messy. Shirt creased. Eyes still heavy from sleep. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "You didn't sleep." I didn't respond. He moved toward the fridge and took out orange juice. Poured a glass. Took a sip. His movements were slow, relaxed. Like nothing had changed. Maybe for him, nothing had. I watched him. Every movement. Every blink. Every pause. Then I said, "When were you going to tell me?" He turned. "Tell you what?" "That you're leaving." He set the glass down. I thought after the party, it was clear. Clear to who? "I didn't know if you wanted it to be talked about," he said. "I figured you wouldn't want goodbyes." I laughed. Quietly. "You figured a lot." He didn't respond. We stood like that for a long moment. The tension between us no longer subtle, no longer hidden in late-night glances or careful silences. It was now a wall. One that neither of us could pretend didn't exist. He walked past me, toward the hallway. "Wait." He stopped. I looked at him. Someone was in the room that night. He didn't move. What? In the video. In the mirror. Someone was there. Watching. He shook his head slowly, unsure if I was serious. "There was no one," he said. I wanted to believe him. But I couldn't. He left the house shortly after. Said he needed to pick something up before his train. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask what. I just watched the door close behind him. I sat at the kitchen table for hours. The house around me pulsed with heat and silence. By noon, I got up, showered, dressed, grabbed my bag, and walked out. I didn't know where I was going until I got there. The library. The old municipal one, the kind with faded carpets and glass display cases of donated first editions. I hadn't been in years. It was almost empty. I sat in the back, far from the front desk. I pulled out my laptop. Plugged in the red USB again. This time, I watched the footage with the sound muted. Focused only on the mirror. Frame by frame. Pause. Rewind. Zoom. There it was. Still. Someone. Sitting. Watching. But then. A flicker. A moment I hadn't caught before. Just before the clip ends. The figure in the mirror stands up. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just enough to be unmistakable. A deliberate movement. And then. The laptop froze. The screen glitched. Then went black. I tried restarting it. Nothing. I sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, the distant cough of an old man reading a newspaper 2 rows down, and the sound of my own breath, now shallow. I packed the laptop. Left the USB inside. And left. On the way home, I noticed something odd. People were setting up banners on our street. Red and white paper lanterns strung from one balcony to the next. A small speaker system being tested near the corner. I asked a neighbor what it was. La Fiesta del Barrio, she said. Starts tonight. Didn't you get the flyer? I hadn't. I smiled. Sounds lovely. I continued walking. And when I reached our house, I saw it. On the doormat. Not a USB. Not an envelope. Just a piece of paper. Torn from a notebook. 5 words again. This time. It's not your house anymore.